So we're getting into this conversation. Our youth perspective takes a different look this morning. Charged, not released. Youth detainees trapped by bond costs. And we're wondering and asking ourselves, okay, is this still going on? It actually is. Melvin Thogo is a lawyer and human rights advocate. She joins us in the hot seat of the Situation Room again after 3 years.
Yes.
Good to have you here this morning. Melvin, good morning.
Good morning, dude.
You're well?
Thank you for having me. Yes,
Thank you for coming. And another face that is no stranger, not just in this room, but in circles, you'll see them very often as a counter-terrorism expert is Neema Mutemi. Neema, good morning.
Good morning, Du. Good morning, Dennis.
Hi.
Good to be here.
Karibu sana. Thanks both of you for being here. Before we get into the thick of things, because they really are, Dennis has taken us to Zambia this week. We'd like you to interpret that proverb for us.
Yeah. So what do you know about Zambia? They were in Kenya recently. What happened to them?
Oh wow, we're not going to let go of this forever, but please honor him.
So, so first, I think it's interesting that I actually didn't know about sports or even Chan until I could not leave the house because I couldn't go anywhere because people were all over the place. But I know that we beat them.
Yeah. So that's very good, important news.
Yeah.
But now let's talk more about Zambia. So they are the largest producers of copper, especially in the continent, and cobalt. If you talk about cobalt, think about phones, think about batteries. Talk about copper, think about electricity and how important that is. So they are the biggest producers of that. Then again, maize is one of the staple in the country, but they don't produce sima, which would be ugali. They produce something called shima, which is porridge-like and is a delicacy and a staple in Zambia. So when you visit, ask for shima, not sima. All right? Shima, yes. Okay. But let's go to the proverb. In the West, there are relatives. In the West, there are relatives. Neema, how would you interpret it?
That's it.
Yes.
What more do you want? I want something.
In the West, where is my West from where we are? Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's a whole concept of we are one, and if something is happening where you might think is far away from you, maybe it's not as far as you think. We are all interconnected. If you look at our history, I actually happen to share some relatives down in South Africa because Kambas.
Long distance traders.
Exactly. Not just that, but the migration patterns. So I think if you look at it from that way, you'll always have neighbors in the West, wherever the West is from you.
Melvin.
Okay. Let's look at it from the perspective of West Africa. Our closest relatives in the West would be Nigerians and then Ghanaians. And this is because I think we do play at very close range. They are leading the West Africans and we are leaving the East Africans.
You didn't just say that.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we have our brothers there and we're here, so we have relatives in the West.
Yeah, aptly put. We are all interconnected is the message out here.
Yeah.
Regardless of where we are, geographically speaking, we are all connected.
Yeah.
Indeed, we are. Okay, so coming off of the latest protests that happened in the country, and this we're looking at Sabasaba, quite a number of people, a larger percentage of them being young people, were arrested.
Yeah.
And not just arrested, but then were taken to court and charged. The majority of those charges linger around terrorism.
Yeah.
Now, it comes off the tongue really easily, but this is a serious charge.
It is.
And that it has a lot in terms of what it portends going into the future for what an individual can or cannot do.
Yeah.
The bond bail charges on these individuals have been in the hundreds of thousands. There's been a lot of lobbying to see that those numbers those amounts be reduced.
Yeah.
And in some cases, there has been some success. In others, there has not been. Why is it important that there is a push to have these amounts reduced and for those individuals who still remain in remand because they cannot raise those? We'll look at that and we'll look at the bigger picture. We'll start with you, Melvin.
Let's look at the bond and bail terms in Kenya. This is a constitutional safeguard from Article 49 of the Constitution of Kenya. And this article provides for every Kenyan arrested and charged is entitled to reasonable bail terms. And then it cascades to also different statutory interpretations and different statutory provisions about the bail. And when you talk about reasonable, reasonable has to be balanced. You balance the interest of the public. You balance the interest of the state. You also balance what are we looking for when we are charging these people. And for these particular cases, why we talk about reduce these things is because I can tell that everybody understands what the state has been trying to do. And the state has not actually arrested terrorists. They have arrested innocent Kenyans. And then they've decided that we want to make this punishment so harsh for you that you'd never again think of dissenting. And so they decide we are going to make it very hard for you to even raise that amount for you to keep staying in prisons. So that is why we keep saying, we are now lobbying and saying, don't punish them any further. Don't punish people whose only mistake was existing and exercising their rights. And when you're looking at public interest, we're also looking at the law. The law is there to serve the society. When you're looking at the people who've actually been charged, where did you get them? Let's go to people who were arrested during Sabasaba. These are people who were picked from wherever they were. Some were working, some were exercising their Article 37, and some were just existing, because the police actually went to the estates and to communities to collect people. And when you collect somebody who's selling mitumbas or somebody who's hawking in a trolley, and then you want to tell them that for you to get out of this place, you're going to pay 300,000 Kenya shillings. How fair is that? When you tell this person that it's 500,000 bond, this person has never owned land, this person has never owned an asset, where are we going to get them? Are we going to use the same law that is supposed to protect this person again to punish them? So this is why we as 50 plus million Kenyans are lobbying and saying, you can't do this. Reduce them, let them attend to their cases, but make it reasonable.
Yeah, Neema, so here is a question where you're charged on terrorism charges, and for majority of us, it just appears as though it's just another charge. But as a counterterrorism expert, when you're charged with these, what exactly are we looking at? Just how deep, how serious is this charge?
Let's start with Dennis Sundu. You must know someone who was out in the streets on 25th of June.
Yep.
Yeah? Of course, we're not asking you to name them, but do you know any of them that was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. And are they currently in custody or not? The ones that you know, like your friends, your peers, who are there with their selfies and their phones. Do you know any of them that was charged with terrorism?
No.
Okay. So what does that tell you? Like every Kenyan knows, whether you live in Kilimani, whether you live in Kileleshwa, or you live in Kayole, you know someone who participated in the protest. But when it comes to who was arrested and charged with this, the numbers start dwindling. So let's take it back to the definition. What is terrorism? Terrorism is the use of violence for political means, or the threat of violence to achieve a political goal. So when you look at that as a ballpark, definition, you realize that the power, even when it comes to bond, how much bond to charge or not, the power starts with the definition. Okay? So who do you perceive as a dangerous person, as a violent person? So young people who went to the streets from the suburbs, from the Kileleshwas and the Kilimanis, are not the ones we perceive as using violence. But then you go to the the outskirts of the city, and then now you find young people arrested in droves. You go to Juja, you find numbers as high as 40, 50, including children who are coming from school. You go to Makongeni, and you find a lot of, rural youth who are also rounded up to do with that. So there's a big problem with how we profile our young people. How we profile young people has a lot to do with how the kinds of charges we are comfortable conferring onto them, especially when it comes to a matter like this that was, nationally interested. And then, of course, you come to the whole political balkanization of the country, and you find in Kirinyaga alone you have 120 people charged with terrorism. Yet, when you actually look at it, do you remember the protests in Kerugoya, Gishugu? Did you see them in the news? But then that's where
there was sporadic reporting,
the highest. Then Nanyuki. I think Nanyuki came into the news later when Njoki died in police custody. And we have to remind ourselves why young people were in the streets. Young people were in the streets because a young person had just died in police custody, and a number of them a year before had been killed by police in the streets. So that is what we have to remember is the genesis of the protests in 2025. It was young people going and saying, no, we do not want to be killed using police. We don't want to be killed by the state. Yeah. So how do you respond to that? You charge them with terrorism. So what is that threat of violence that message conferred about the state? I think that's why we have to start. Because when you call them terrorists, when the charges are terrorism, then there's literally a very short leeway that you have with how low the bail can be. You've already been framed.
But it seems a pretty serious thing to kind of throw about flippantly. That it's like killing a mosquito with a sledgehammer. Are there no other ways to then deal with this, as Melvin called it, dissent, if that's the case, than throwing terrorism at it? Because it is quite serious, and that it's very difficult to get such charges removed or to get the besmirching of your image wiped away in the future. Is it not a serious thing to throw around? We don't see, even in other jurisdictions, that the act of terrorism or the charge of terrorism is leveled against folks who were in a protest.
But is it not effective? Of course it's serious, and I think the seriousness of it, if it wasn't supposed to have a serious effect, they wouldn't use it, right? So let me take you back a little bit in our history. We have Mau Mau. Do you know today I went to school to study terrorism. So for those who are wondering whether I'm a professional terrorist,
you know what you're talking about.
So when you actually look at the definition of terrorism, and even textbooks that enlist the list of terrorist organizations, you'll find Mau Mau still today listed as a terrorist organization. So,
but by whom?
One man's, I told you, whoever controls the definition, right?
Yeah.
So one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. So you have to, when you're asking that question, you have to ask it knowing which side you're standing. Are you standing on the side of freedom fighters, or are you standing on the side of the people who are seeing them as terrorists, right? So when you actually look at the implications go way beyond just their lives today, right? So think about the same Mau Mau. Think about their children, their wives. What happened after when we got independence? How were they included in society? How were they included in government? You realize that just that branding, 4 generations down, has continued to perpetuate exclusion, has continued to perpetuate inequality. So what we should be worried about, of course we must be worried about the 500 or so young people today whose lives, when they go back, when they're released, whether on bond or on bail, they go back and the employers tell them, you can't work here anymore, we can't employ terrorists, because there's repercussions. So immediate repercussions, of course, is to the young people themselves. Second is to their families. Third, their employees, because all of a sudden you are employing a terrorist. So there's repercussions that are going to follow these young people for the rest of their lives, and probably even the generation that comes after.
Yeah.
Right?
And
so yeah.
And if you look at these people, at the very worst, let's say they were misbehaving while protesting and it was supposed to be a peaceful protest.
Okay.
At the very worst, they should have been charged under the penal code, or with some misdemeanor, but not going into the Porter charges. And if you look at it that way, then you realize that the state is actually maliciously, putting these people away. And psychologically, also, if you look at the same people who've been charged, you realize that it's almost like a win. And when you look at even how the law operates under the Porter, and Porter is the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Under Porter, you can actually ask to detain somebody for 300 days. And say that investigations are still ongoing. So when they employ this, they're actually going for the harshest of them. They're wondering, it's not enough that we take you to court for arranging stones and then the magistrate tells you pay 500 shillings or go for community service. They want the harshest, the one that it leaves your family in ruins, it leaves your reputation in ruins. When you come back, you actually don't know where to start from. So it's malice aforethought. You
see, when you talk about someone has been arrested and is being now charged with terrorism, one would assume that police have done the investigations. By the time you've been taken to court, there is reason enough for you to appear there. But even if you look at the article here today, one Boniface Mwangi was arrested on July 19th and he was charged release on 1 million shillings personal bond. But even as at yesterday, still the police are asking for more time to conduct investigations for them to continue with this matter. The defense says we are ready for the matter. The ODPP says we still need more time. And this brings me to the question that is the state taking advantage of the justice system, or is the state weaponizing the justice system to just control Kenyans who want to come out protest?
Yes, they are. And it's a very sad state that you as an ordinary Kenyan think that I have laws to protect me, then those laws are turned again and weaponized to actually punish you. So laws go both ways. They can be used as tools of oppression or for the for the betterment of the society. But in our case, they've decided that within our laws we can actually find some tools to oppress you. And when we looking at the cases we've dealt with, especially the terrorism ones, there's a case I'll refer to one case from Matu where they were arrested first and the charges were arson, and then these charges were again dropped. We weren't given any tangible reason as to why these charges were dropped, but they were dropped and rearrested and now brought to Nairobi and charged with terrorism. And then the court is asked that we need more time because these guys are likely to go back home and interfere with evidence and and at the end of the day, even when you see whatever they're bringing, they're actually just bringing statements from police officers. I will not go into this case because it's a live case, but even the people that you're bringing on board, it's a police officer saying, I saw this person burning this station. So it's not, I don't know where this investigation is being done that you have to hold these people for so long. At the end of the day, whatever you're bringing, even after the 21 days, is you're just bringing a statement from a police. And now we are wondering, as an ordinary Kenyan, how would I interfere with a police officer? And the reason they would also use this is so that even in the public eye, because not all of us are, not everyone is like Melvin who's going to look at you and say, I actually think that this is being used against you. When you go back home, how do they look at you in a place where, in a community where people have not been arrested, this is looked as bad luck? How do they look at you knowing that this is on you? And when you saw the presser, the people were crying because this is pain. It goes back to the very fabric of your own life, your community ties. It goes back to how do people look at me? And when now my fingerprints and my credentials are all over the place that I am a terrorist, how is it looking at me? And if you realize this was actually brought by the president in 2024, called people criminals, and then this year again they brought in the issue of terrorists, and it's just you want to paint the young people as the oppressors. You also want to paint the young people as they are the ones who don't want peace. Kenya is where it is right now, according to the state, that Kenya is where it is now because of the young people. So these laws are being weaponized, and it's very disturbing. It's a disturbing pattern. If we let it continue, they might not be useful in the long run.
What's the status of the folks who have been asking for a reduced bail bond amount, and how far is that going at the moment?
Some were significantly reduced, and we've been able to pay through the public fundraiser, and some have also been able to pay for themselves. But we still have some, we are still asking the courts to reduce, because we realize even as we fundraise, it's going to be impossible for us to raise that amount of money. When you come to bond is, it's not cash. It's when they ask for 300 bond, they want you to bring something that can actually be valued at 300. And you look at the status of the person who's being detained. This person comes from a family that has never seen anything that can be valued at 300 at once. Maybe you have a relative who owns a motorbike, and that motorbike cannot be valued at 300. I would cite the cases we have cases in Kerugoya, Wanguru, and the court has actually intentionally just denied these people cash bail. Like, there's no cash bail option. And their charges are malicious damage to property, stealing, handling stolen goods. And when you go to now, when you start asking questions like, so why are you denying them the cash bail? Why is it not an option for them? Because there should be an option. Instances where the court has denied cash bail is, they say, first of all, we don't know, we have no trace of this person's family. These are some of the cases, the real cases that you're dealing with, that we don't know where you come from. You've refused to give any details about your family who can be contacted in case you do not attend court. But in these cases, these people, their relatives attend court every time. Their mother, their father comes, their grandfather comes and says, I will be here when you need me. So why are you denying them cash bail? So these are questions that even us, we are wondering, who's going to answer these questions? Because the court is not providing sufficient reasons and grounds for denying this cash bail. But so far, the ones we've asked, these are the thicker cases. They were reduced from 100 to 15,000, and that went very well. We've been able to bail everybody in file 1454 in Thika. In Nanyuki, the same, reduced from 100 to 10,000. We bailed out everybody. In Naivasha, the same. The list, I think, was 20,000, and we paid. So cash between 50 and 20, at least, we've been managing to pay. But when it exceeds that, I have very vulnerable girls in Langata, very young, like tender young, who we are still looking for 100 per person. And for the last almost 3 weeks, we've been in court just asking the court, please, we can't manage this. Yes, you've reduced it from 300 to 100, but it is still unmanageable. And
so, Neema, obviously, this is the practice and or act of terrorism, and then looking at the other side of it in terms of what is constitutionally binding, whatever the jurisdiction. In this case, we're talking about Kenya. What should it be? Should we be looking at a situation where somebody is under a charge of terrorism, that they then should receive the required respectable bail or bond terms? Is it something that we should be arguing even?
I think that's a very good question, and I'll tie it with Dennis's question. Injustice thrives in darkness. So, in a way, this is very good, because it has caught our attention, and we are now focusing on what's happening within the justice system. Even someone who was caught blowing up, Westgate or in Garissa, if they were arrested literally in the act, they still have some rights in under our constitution and under the international, legal system. So I think the first thing is we need to pay attention to what's happening, and we need to literally check the stories that are coming out of this. If you listen to the three young people, there's stories about being denied food in remand centers, so that they are starving by the time they go to court to accept charges, right? There's questions about being beaten in the middle of the night in their police cells, being beaten mercilessly throughout the night, and they come to court and they've got injuries. So do you think Albert Ojwang and Njoki were the first young people to die in police custody? So now that you're having the ones who went to protest because of them still facing the same beatings, if that can happen when the whole world is still clamoring for justice for Albert Ojwang, what do you think is really going on? So I think we've been silent, we've been quiet, and we have sidelined the stories of those people who've gone through the criminal system. That's why this can go on. So if we do have terrorists, and even let's forget about the whole terrorism term. Let's just talk about what happened. We had goons who vandalized and who stole property, right? But guess what's happening in that Kerugoya? What's happening to those business people who reported that their businesses were torched? In the same communities they have to run their businesses, people's children are rotting and being brought to terrorism charges. What have you done to that business in that community? They have to continue living in that community. Yeah? And some of those young people might even be related to some of the businesses that were vandalized, right? Yeah? So when you don't do what you're supposed to do, nobody benefits out of it. Of course we want justice. Of course we want the perpetrators of that violence to be caught and to be brought, to justice. But that's not what we are seeing. Unfortunately, we are seeing young people who didn't have anything to do with the protest. We're seeing children. Why wouldn't we make so much noise when children who are attending school are brought to court and immediately the judge just says, take this, parents, take your children back. That doesn't tell you anything about the whole process. So we have to invalidate, the whole process, because when we have tangible evidence that, rule of law was not being followed, then how can we trust the verdict that will come out of it, So yes, we do have to be careful when you have serious charges such as terrorism, because nobody wants to free terrorists to go back and make the community unsafe. This week, we were hosting, the fourth terrorism conference, and when you listen to even what the PS was saying, is that we need to work with the border communities so that they can, serve as early warning system. But what have you done to our intelligence on counterterrorism? When you flood the intelligence system with 75 names of Wanja and Wanjiko and Mutua who are just going about their own businesses. Yeah. So what does that actually do? Guess what? Resources are going to be tracked to actually follow these cases, and what did you just see at the beginning of the week? Now there's a terrorist alert, by the US Embassy that has gone up. Of course, what's happening in Kenya is not only affecting Kenya. It's affecting the whole world, because Kenya is a very strategic point for counter-terrorism. The Kahawa court itself was not built with Kenyan taxpayer money. It was built by American tax dollars. So what does that actually tell you? We're not even being accountable, even when we are receiving help to make the country safer, to make the world safer. And why were we protesting? There's also this thing about protest versus terrorism. Protest is necessary because Kenya has a language of violence. When young people have, and from schools, we have committees, where children are supposed to air their grievances. We have all these platforms, and we're very good at policy making, when it comes to youth issues in this country. Do they really work? So our political system, our culture has shown young people that if you want people to listen, you have to protest. You have to protest in schools. You have to protest in one form or another. And look at how we do our handshakes. It's the threat of that protest, the threat of violence is rewarded. So young people also listen and observe. They didn't go to the streets because, they just wanted to have fun. They have real grievances that they need to air out. And they know that that's the only way that they can get attention.
I mean, we talk about this terrorism charge on the face of it, and one would argue, to those who don't understand the veracity, it's just another charge out there, might as well walk. But now if you dig deeper into it, you look at its charge and it's so serious in the sense that now that someone is charged for terrorism, leaving this country is difficult because all your documents have been flagged because you are a terrorist threat or whatever. But then again, you look at the veracity of this charge, the number of young people who are in jail, one would say, with no charge. Are we not watering down the veracity of this charge the way it's supposed to be looked at? Because then again, if someone walking by the streets is considered a terrorist, then how serious is that charge anyway?
Of course, but Dennis, no, I don't think there's any Kenyan who doesn't think terrorism is a serious charge. You know, even those who are very illiterate, right? So yes. And the implications, forget about you and me who need a passport to fly to wherever we are going. You cannot think about getting a job. You cannot get certificate of good conduct. That's just the basic clearance. Which job today does a young person apply for without a certificate of good conduct? And how long will it take for you to actually get that clearance? Because terrorism charges, what's the average time they take? You know, we just had the one of the Al-Shabaab cases just closing almost 10 years later, just the other day, right? So for 10 years, these kids, their life is in limbo, you know? At a SACCO jobs for Matatu, they need a certificate of good conduct, right?
We were actually in court yesterday asking the court to have the officers return their IDs because their IDs were taken when they were arrested and charged. So we're just asking the court, you know, it's impossible in this country to continue living your life because I couldn't even get this. I couldn't get in here in this building without leaving my ID at the gate. And so if I don't have it and I don't know how, I don't have an abstract saying that I lost it at some point, they start treating me suspiciously that who are you? And you're right. I mean, when now you want to throw these Porter charges all over the place, how will you convince us next time that actually what you're talking about is serious? And let me ask you, Dennis and Du, every time we've had an actual terrorist attack, you guys know how the country has felt. You guys are old enough to relate to the Westgate and Dusit and
even the US Embassy.
And the Garissa, is it Garissa University?
Yes.
How was the feeling? How was the feeling even after that? How was even the state treating? You know, you could feel the fear. You could feel the ruins that we have been left into. So when you're talking about a young girl or a young boy who was just going about their day, and then now you call them a terrorist, and let's separate this. Just because a police station was burnt or a low court was burnt down during protest does not mean that there was a terrorism act going on. We have to separate what was a reaction to what the government was doing. How did Mawego police station get burnt? It was because these guys kept calling you guys to address an issue and you didn't. So it was a reaction. It was they were angry. They were not maybe furthering a certain agenda of terrorism. I need Kenyans to be very serious, and we need to be serious.
What does it take to have a terrorism charge dropped? It's not like, you know, you have misdemeanor or felony that has been leveled against you, and then you can say, well, the prosecutor or the office of the ODPP the office of the DP in this case would say, okay, for lack of evidence, we come before you, the court, and we say, okay, well, the state doesn't find, then you can drop. But with this, what would it take to have a case of terrorism, a charge of terrorism dropped and that expunged from your record?
I think this is going to be a precedent. So we've already saw with Boniface Mwangi's case, one of the charges was already dropped the moment he was presented in court, but there's still a case that's following. So we are seeing a lot of revision of the charges. So just from the court processes themselves, however the prosecution is going to decide to proceed with the cases, they might revise those charges, and eventually what you have a ruling on might have different terminology. So that's one, you know, just the prosecution deciding what they're going to be charging Neema with, right? But secondly, you know, some of it is never going to go away. How many people, only remember I saw your face, you were a terrorist. Not everyone is going to have the benefit of following your case and knowing that you are acquitted from this.
Yeah.
And that happens with any other charge as well. So that's where the threat is for these young people. And even as we have this task force that's looking into compensation, we have to start calculating the impact to people's lives if the state actually pursues a malicious prosecution charge against you. How do we calculate the loss of livelihoods? How do we calculate even just the community stigmatization? We have had cases of people being defiled while in custody. So even if the charges are dropped or they win the case and and they're acquitted, they have that trauma for the rest of their lives. You're never going to be unraped because you're never going to have to reverse that. And look at the young people. And I don't want to paint a very a too gloomy picture. I want to also really commend Kenyans. One, of course, Kenyans are giving money when they know about these cases. But two, even Kenyans in those very low courts, in the remand centers, the very first call we got from about the Matu youth, actually a whistleblower was from within the remand center in the GK Yatta prison, who was uncomfortable with how these children were being beaten before they had even been presented to court. So we are having Kenyans saying this is not okay. From the prison cells, we have an OCS in Kasarani who refused to receive these young people when they were brought to his police station, and they had to be taken somewhere else where they were being beaten because he clearly said this is against the law. I do not understand why these young people who are not even arrested within my vicinity are being brought to my police station. Remember, this is just a few weeks after the Albert Ojwang case. So we are having even the young people themselves telling us when we got to committee, we were happy because at least we were treated as humans. So even the wardens in committee maximum prison are taking care of them and being parents and making sure they're well fed. And their parents are saying, when I went to committee, at least my child didn't look like a skeleton anymore. So we do have Kenyans who are seeing what's happening and refusing to participate in this whole orchestration. And we need more Kenyans to do the same thing. When you see something that isn't right, when you see charges, even the judges, questioning some of this, and in Kahawa Court as well, we have to commend the probation department and the what's the other one called that does the registry. So when we file for probation review, there's a whole for bail review. There's a whole process. So even just the probation office working overtime to make sure that they process it once the ruling is done, and it goes down within hours, we are able to actually pay. Get the reports, the probation report, and get these young people out. So where you'll see that we have had issues of bail and bond terms not going down, is actually not the terrorism court. It's these other courts, the Makadaras and the others that are not, the prime charge. So we do have, a mixed bag of good and bad, because this is going to taint the whole country. We need, people in church not to isolate, your mother because their child is in committee. We've even seen cases where churches are coming together, and saying, what do we do about these children? We have 3 Burundians who are still in custody because they need Kenyans to come and, stand in their part and say that we will be accountable for these Burundian nationals. These Burundians have been lived here for years. They've done businesses. They've come to your house and helped you. So why is it taking almost 2 months for anyone who has worked with them, has lived with them, to come and just say, I know this person, they're good?
One would say at the center of these all is politics. So you look at what is happening, the president calling these terrorism, and that then being picked up, and these are the charges being preferred. And one would argue that independent institutions are allowing themselves to be misused by the political class. And with that, the constitutionalism and the respect of law seems to have been thrown outside the door. Now it's just sent and focused on politics. Is that the case?
It is. It is, and you're right. You're a Kenyan, just as I am, and you're looking at it from the right angle. But also, let's ask, when you say them allowing themselves to be used, who brought them there? I mean, there was a change. The ODPP was, appointed by this same regime. If you go to any independent institution that you're now looking at, a constitutional institution, they were appointed by these people. So for them, it's when the boss says jump, they just ask how high, because they want to retain their jobs. They want the benefits that this person is getting. But the most unfortunate thing is, when you're taking oath of office, you're actually swearing to the Constitution. Not just to the person to a certain office, but to the Constitution. And I think it's very unfortunate, and it's also intellectual dishonesty that you know what you're doing. And this, honestly, the ODPP, they know what they're doing, and they still keep on doing. And they know that what they're doing is not right. They know that the charges they're putting on these guys are very harsh. And they're saying, as long as you want to ruffle feathers ukoju, we are going to make it very harsh. And like we said before, it's very unfortunate that we would use the same constitution that is meant to protect people, that is meant to be regulating this discretion. Again, we use it and now turn it around that it is you. And they actually do know, like I sit with these people in court and looking at them, they actually know that in the end, this case will end. Maybe in 3 years, it will end, or in a year, it will end. You'll go back home. But in those 3 years, what will they have done to you?
The damage is untold in terms of, and it's irreversible, is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
And compounding with
because
every additional month.
You saw a young man crying and asking, Tena mimi nimekuwa Al-Shabaab, things like that. You saw a young girl asking, how am I going to again pick my life? From where? So they know that from next month, we're going to, the prosecution is going to bring in their case. We are going to hear what they have, and then we will decide whether we have a case to answer, and we'll see how the court goes about it. But they know even the times when they come and some of the things they don't want, when they bring in the affidavits as to why they want to keep on detaining these people, we can tell that there's nothing here, there's nothing substantial, but they just want to keep you here. And so let me also mention that I go to detention facilities, I go to court, and I interact with these people, their relatives and these people. And one of the things that it's like they're successfully managing to do is to silence these people such that you never want to raise your voice. You don't even want to be seen that it's you who was charged with this case. You do not want anyone to say, even when you tell them, you can just come and talk to people, they don't want to do that. And when you get somebody out of that facility, when they're going back home, the first few days they're very disoriented. They don't talk to normal people. When I was talking to one of our clients, I was talking to them and they're like, yes madam. I told them, yo, this is not prison. But they'd been there for 2 months. This is not prison. But then maybe it's because, I was in a suit and they're used to anybody who's in that level. And I told them, we're just here to help you. We are also just one of you. So when they're doing this, they actually know what they're doing. And remember that this also came as an aftermath. When you follow the stories of the people who were taken from Mawego, someone had gone to the police station to bail out somebody else who was arrested and told Araka, kijana toa belt, kijana toa viatu, get in here.
They were just caught up in the
Yes, and they didn't know what was happening until I think almost 7 days later, they were landing in committee and they're told, you're a terrorist, you're given your own isolated room, you can't even mix with other people. Taken in Langata, and now you are isolated because now you're a female terrorist here, and things like that. It was an afterthought. So they were when they arrested, and some probation reports we received, some of them even up to 15 days. These guys there were no charges preferred on them. It's because now they were looking, what is the harshest charge that we can put here so that this person never even thinks of leaving the house. And you can hear the parents saying, mimi siku moja nisikie tu ati kuna maandamano hata mtoto wangu haizi enda shule. Like they're crippling us and stifling everything. And This is sad.
If this is the position that the state has taken, because that's what it is, if this is the position that it has taken, I mean, we can ask about overturning charges and we can ask about reducing or reviewing bail and things like this. But if this is a position that it has taken in terms of, and yes, there are reasons that are being given, protection of the state, maintenance of law and order, to insist that, a government is doing what it ought to do and would not want a situation whereby melee and fracas is the order of the day. Mm-hmm. How do you look at an alternate position if the state, the all-powerful state, is the one who is saying, this is the position that we have taken? Do we see us moving the needle in the opposite direction?
First and foremost, I think this administration, Murkomen and his ministry, really need to reconsider, because this is the single most dangerous thing they have done to this country. Because such acts like this are exactly what breeds radicalization. So in effect, you're going to radicalize these young people. Now that you have thrown terrorism at them, what is next? What do they have to fear after this? So you have literally just multiplied the number of radical young people by the number of young people that you have arrested and falsely accused with these charges. You have also locked them in spaces where they met real terrorists, right? So you have literally facilitated the breeding ground for radicalization, given them connections. Who knows whether they were not targeted while they were being charged? If you look at all the cases of suicide bombers that have been documented, it always starts with a grievance against the state. So, and we have a long history between communities and the state and counterterrorism, right? In this country, look at what happens in Kwale, in Tana River, in the coast, in Garissa. Whenever you try and charge young, clerics, young people, without following due process, without verifying that these are actually real terrorists, you always multiply the number of people who are going to go into violent extremism. So this is very dangerous precedence. This is the single most, and it's going to have effects for generations long after Ruto is no longer president. Right? So this is something that is also going to take an all of community approach to begin reversing. We need parents, we need teachers, we need schools, we need communities, we need mosques to really get involved with the rehabilitation of these young people once they start going back home. We need people to show up and handhold them back into building their lives. Because if we don't, the grievance that they had, which was just, we can't get jobs, we can't, it was very, I can't afford food on the table. Now they have a political grievance. There's no terrorism charge that is not political. In fact, the very definition, and that's why I started with the definition, is the use of terror, or is the use of fear for a political objective. So this is all political. It's always going to be political, and it's going to take everyone playing their part to make sure that the damage doesn't go beyond what the state has just done through the judiciary.
Melvin Thogo is a lawyer and human rights advocate. Neema G. Mutemi is a counter-terrorism expert. These are the conversations that we're having this morning. A friend of mine says all the time that at the very least, what we do is give information about the situation, things that people would never have known before, and it gives us an opportunity to discuss these things in a manner in which we never would have. It would have been silence and keep in the corner, but let's talk about these things that are happening. Thank you for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation this Friday, and for rounding out the week with this conversation on the youth perspective. Everybody, thank you so much. Our audiences across board. We'll talk again next week. God willing, have a good weekend.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.